Hey guys, I am Stuart Breeding. Welcome back to S2TV in our ongoing, never-ending series on the squat. I think today is part 7. We're going to talk about lower back issues and core issues, which are exactly the same issue in your squat, what might be going on with it, how to fix it. I want to start this conversation talking about issues in the lower back, which are usually almost always related to the QL or quadratus lumborum. So this muscle is almost always overactive in people, and it's overactive for two reasons. The erector spinae, the muscles that are responsible for extension in your lumbar, T-spine, and also cervical spine, all the way up, are usually underactive. And the core muscles, and when I say core, I'm not just talking about abdominals, folks. We're talking about muscles that people rarely think or hear about. Multifidus, diaphragm, internal obliques. These muscles also are underactive, and they're underactive because we are a culture of sitting. We're sitting all the time. We're sitting at our desk. We're sitting in our cars all the time, and this has a profound effect on our body, especially when we're talking about spinal stability. So what ends up happening when we're sitting is we're getting into what's called upper cross syndrome. The shoulders are pronated forward. I'm in a kyphotic curvature, and when we're in this kyphotic curvature, the effects are directly translated to the QL, quadratus lumborum, below it, that becomes overactive, trying to support the spinal cord, or I'm sorry, the skeletal system directly above it, especially when we're looking at something like a low bar back squat. So if you're having issues with your lower back, I guarantee you're having issues with erector spinae stability and also core stability. So we're going to treat all these as one big issue. I will say, back in the early 80s when I learned to squat, we were taught to look up and to stick our butts back as far as possible and create this hyperlordotic curvature. And I know that's still popular in a couple of strength schools like Westside still teaches that. I firmly believe that this is the wrong conclusion. We should be trying to hold as neutral, straight spine as we possibly can, and a hyperlordotic curvature is something that we should be trying to avoid. So we're going to look at some stretches, and we're going to look at some exercises, how you can learn to relax the QL, number one, how to get it to not be so overactive, and how we can encourage the erector spinae and also the core to become active again. So before we get into stretches and exercises for the lower back and core, I want to reiterate just for a moment the issues that we're really talking about here. And there's 3 places, remember, that you can break in the spinal cord, and a break is just an excessive curvature that we are attempting to neutralize. The first one would be the C-spine, or the back of the head, and this is caused by looking up excessively or looking down excessively. Both have profound effects on upper back musculature. The second is going to be kyphotic curvature, and that's a rounding of the shoulders, okay? This is a problem because the effects of this are directly received on the lower spine. The third place you can break in the spine is this hyperlordotic curvature or an anterior tilt. Now, like I said, many people have been taught to squat in this way, where we're looking up and then sticking our butts back, creating an anterior tilt. Although this may tighten the hamstrings and there's some advantage, I firmly believe we are breaking our spine in 2 places. There's just no way you're as strong as you could possibly be or lift as much weight as you possibly could because we've broken our spine in 2 places. It makes absolutely no sense. So attempting to remove those 3 breaks is really at the heart and soul of what we're getting at with these videos. So when we're talking about that hyperlordotic curvature, once again, this is probably happening from weak core musculature. All right, especially in the squat, is creating this hyperlordotic curve. So we're going to look at some stretches first, and then we'll get into some exercises. So the first one that I'm going to do is one that I've already taught before. It's a forward fold, and we're going to add some variation to it to try to get into the QL and erector a little bit more directly. So the forward fold starts with just what's called mountain pose. Stand up as tall as you possibly can. Extend your spine up as long and tall as possible. From here, I'm going to begin to stretch in the hip hinge. Now when I'm stretching, this is not an RDL. When I'm stretching, I can keep my knees locked and extended. I don't want to hyperextend them. And if you're just simply too tight, bend the knees a little bit and treat this more like an RDL. So I want a neutral back position, driving the hips back as far as I possibly can, reaching down towards the calf. Once I get about halfway down the calf, what I'm going to do is add a little dimension to this. And I'm going to reach across the back of my calf and concentrate. I'm going to put all my intention on the area below the scapula going all the way down into the PSIS. And just hold that stretch for about 30 seconds to 3 minutes, as long as you possibly can. Come up out of it, extend your spine once again, forward fold, push the hip back, reach down, reach across, think about that area. You'll feel a stretch all the way down the lat, down the erector, and into the QL. And once again, I hold those stretches for as long as I feel like I need to. Remember, the GTO, the Golgi tendon organ in the individual muscle, takes about 30 seconds to decide it is ready to relax enough to stretch. So 30 seconds just for the GTO to decide, hey, let's go ahead and stretch. Then after that, you have to allow time for the actual stretch to begin. So take your time. I firmly believe longer is better when we're talking about stretching. Okay guys, so the next stretch I'm going to show you is one of the most basic yoga stretches that there is. It's called cat-cow. So the best way to set this up is to move into a tabletop position. I'm going to put my hands directly underneath my shoulders and then bring my knees in line with my pelvis, trying to create as flat back, neutral spine position as I possibly can. So once I'm in this neutral position, looking straight down, I'm going to move intentionally into a posterior tilt, create that kyphotic curvature as much as I can. I'm pushing my shoulder blades apart. I'm pushing the scapula apart as far as I possibly can, and I am flexing that spine. I'm pressing the floor, pulling my spine up, pulling my abdominals up and in. And from here, I'm going to reverse it and do the exact opposite. I'm going to look up, pull my spine up again, anterior tilt, creating as much curvature as I possibly can. Cat, cow. Very, very simple to get into. You can do this anywhere. Great stretch, great warm-up stretch, especially for the lower back and erectors. The next stretch I'm going to show you is directly for the QL. It takes a little bit more to set it up. You got to have a little something to support yourself with this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this exercise or stretch up for the right side of my QL. So the way I'm going to do this is to take my right foot and cross the left over right. My right hand, I'm holding on to the rack here, is going to move over and across my head, and I'm going to grab a hold of the rack. Now from here, I'm just going to gently press my hip to the right side, so I'm almost completely bending laterally, which the QL has a large responsibility for stabilizing this movement pattern. And I'm going to hold this stretch. You're going to feel this almost right away. If you have a tight QL, as soon as you get into this, you're going to stretch it right away. So very, very, very simple to do as long as you have a little something anchoring you. Remember, whatever side I'm stretching, that foot goes down. I'm going to thread the other foot directly over top. Reach over with the side I'm stretching. Grab a hold and anchor and let that hip press out to the side you're stretching. Once again, hold for about 30 seconds, upwards of 3 minutes. Okay, so the next stretch I'm going to show you is for the QL also. The setup is similar to puppy pose or child pose, and it really is just a matter of comfort level for you. But what I'm going to do is put the weight back on my heels or hips, and I'm going to begin to reach forward and stretch. So I'm going to walk my fingertips out, and then what I'm going to do is start to move to one side, and you'll feel once again an incredible stretch down the lat. This is really good stretch for the QL. And I'll just slowly slide my hands back over, start reaching the other way, just walk my hands and try to drop. So from a side angle, this is moving, my hips are moving back, arms are moving straight out, and then I just want to start walking my hands one direction, left side, right side, and back to center once again. Really easy, simple stretch. Okay guys, so the last stretch that we're going to get into today is called the plow. Now, I've been studying yoga for about 20 years. I still have so much infinite growth with flexibility and mobility. It's the great thing about a yoga practice. This is a great whole back stretch. I by no means am a master of this. I'm going to give you my best attempt at it. This is a more aggressive stretch, so if you're not ready, if you feel like you're getting a lot already from the stretches that I've shown you, stick with them, and maybe later on you can graduate to this pose. But it's called the plow pose. So the best and easiest way to get into this is just to lay down. We're going to pack our feet underneath us close to the glutes, and then from here I'm going to press the floor down, and I'm going to create some momentum and weight with my feet moving behind me. So from here I'm going to simply support my lumbar spine, create some weight and momentum with my legs moving toward and behind my head. Now as you get better at this, you can bring the knees gently down towards the floor. The people that are really the best at this pose are able to bring both knees in line with the ears. I do not have that kind of flexibility in my spine. I'm working on it. But it is a wonderful stretch, especially for the erector. The QL not as much, but the erectors for sure. And this is moving all the way, all the muscles from the lumbar, the thoracic, and also the cervical spine. So it's kind of a great all-around back stretch. Be careful with this one. Okay guys, so before we get into any of these core exercises, I want to talk about one more issue that we see coming up in the squat. The first one we talked about was that hyperlordotic curvature, and also if we see it here, we probably also see it in the C-spine, and we'll get to that later on. The second biggest issue we have in the squat is what I call the good morning squat, and it is a big issue with me because there are several people out there who are actually teaching the squat this way, and it couldn't be more incorrect. So what I'm talking about is when we move down into the bottom of the squat and we're beginning to rise out of it, our hip extensors are stronger than the core, and especially if I have a bar on my shoulders. This is a tremendously huge issue, and it's coming from core weakness. So once again, I get down into the bottom of the squat, I start to shoot out. My hip extensors are much stronger than my core's ability to stabilize my spinal position under load. This is not a correct way to squat, all right? It needs to be fixed. Technically, we should be able to squat the same amount of weight that we're deadlifting, and if you can't, I guarantee it's because you have a weak core. So we're going to get into our first core exercise. So this one is pretty easy. I love simple, easy to do exercises with limited equipment, and especially when we're talking about core and back warm-ups or corrective exercise, I want an exercise that is going to stimulate as much of those muscles as possible, working them together. It will be impossible to do a correct core exercise and also not engage those spinal muscles that we're talking about. So I'm going to sit on the Swiss ball. This could also just be on the chair. Swiss ball makes it much, much tougher because I'm stabilizing here. My feet are together. My knees are going to be together. Now, you could also have a ball right here working abduction. Once again, I want to do as much as I possibly can. I'm going to grab a dumbbell. This could be a ball, could be a kettlebell. Interlace my fingers, or you can actually hold it out like this, all right? From here, extend the spine up straight, push the dumbbell out, twist off to the side, and I'm going to put my right elbow over top of the left knee, bring this up and back in. The goal is not to move my knees and the ball out of the way. I want to move myself. I want to move my torso forward, over top of my lap, back up and in. I'll do it one more time. Extend out. You will feel your core and back engage immediately. Stabilize the ball, back up and in. So the first exercise I just showed you is a variation of a chop. There are literally hundreds of different kinds of chopping movements, and in my mind they're the best core exercises, corrective exercises that I can begin to think of. They include all of the core musculature and back musculature that we're talking about. So they're great warm-ups, they're great corrective exercises. I'm going to show you some basic variations and we'll make them a little bit tougher and a little bit more involved. So I'm on a cable machine, it's right behind me here. If you don't have a cable, very simple. You can just attach a band onto something immobile. You can attach it to a rack, put it on a doorknob, something that isn't going to move. From here, I'm pulling the band out, placing it into my center, and I'm going to bring both hands together and interlace my fingers. Now, this thing is already starting to tug on me, all right? I'm in a good squat stance. My feet are screwed into the ground. All the cues that I've given you before are still as important here as they are in squatting. My head is neutral, my shoulder blades are retracted, my abdominals are tight, my feet are screwed into the floor. Now from here, I'm going to press, breathe out, all the way out, and then breathe in. For some of you that have seen some old school Bruce Lee movies, this is called Sanshin. This is a practice we used to do a lot in Okinawan karate that is preparing the body for impact. So I'm literally tightening all the musculature in the core, around the back, and obliques, glutes, legs, everything is squeezing and tightening together. And I want to incorporate my breath into this movement. So once again, inhale. Retract scapula, tighten the abdominals, exhale completely. Hold, inhale. So reps are going to look something like this. And I want to make sure that this stays on my center line, in and out. Once it starts pulling off to the side, I've lost the purpose of this variation. Okay guys, so I'm going to give you our next variation. I'm going to start this one on the inside foot. I'm going to press my arms and extend my elbows completely out. Now watch a lot of people doing chops, and they keep their elbows bent close to their body. What I'm looking to do is to integrate as much of these core and back muscles as I possibly can. The closer I keep the weight, the easier it's going to be. The more I extend that weight out and away from me, the harder it is, and therefore the more muscles I'm recruiting to pull this cable. So I'm going to start it right on top of the inside toe. Breathe in again and pull to the center line and hold. Release. Inhale. Exhale. Now watch. I'm going to keep my hip perfectly square, straight ahead. I do not want to incorporate my hip. The hip is so powerful that when we start torquing it, I can throw massive amounts of weight around the room and never get into this core musculature. I want to stabilize my pelvis. I want to stabilize my hip, press out, and my T-spine including my eyes are looking directly over my hands, are going to pull the cable into place and hold. Now, I'm not a huge fan of crossing over and going this way because the lever arm is getting shorter. There is less resistance from the center to the opposite side. Therefore, you're not deriving the same amount of benefit. Once again, over top of the inside foot, exhale, inhale before you start the range of motion. So moving along, I want to remind you that these exercises are choices that I'm giving you because we're talking about the squat, issues that are arising while we're squatting. So why not incorporate it into our movement here, all right? So I've basically taken my cable, I've dropped it down to the low position. I'm going to set up my squat again, get my grip, and I'm going to press my hands to the inside of my knee. The tibia or shin is pretty vertical here. I'm in a big hip hinge. I'm really stretching my butt out there as far as I can. From here, inhale, and I'm going to extend and lock. I'm going to press my glutes in, lock the quadricep, and bring my hands up at an angle. If I were looking at a clock, facing a clock with my right foot on the inside, this would basically be if I'm looking straight ahead, a 4 o'clock position. I'm bringing my hands up and extending them to the 10 o'clock position. If I were to turn around, it is exactly the opposite. I would be going from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And the cable is moving at the same speed as my hip is rising. I don't want the cable to move here and then my hip. I want my hip and hands and core to all fire at one time and come to full extension and completion at the end. Now that's the low position. More advanced would be with a lunge. I'm going to take my arms off the side. Elbow is across the top of the knee again. Come up and at the same time start moving the chop across my body. This is a lot tougher to stabilize. You have a tendency to lean or use leverage. Try not to. I'm keeping my spine on the center line, pressing through the floor, up and across. Now, we can come back to middle. We could bring it all the way up. Coming down has a totally different effect. You're going to need to use more weight if we're pulling down. And the clock is different. I'm pulling from 2 o'clock now all the way to 8. If I turn around, I'm coming down 10 to 4. And this also can be done in a lunge. I recommend the resistance. If the resistance is over here on the inside, we want the inside leg to be forward. Okay guys, the ultimate progression. I've talked a little bit about using exercises that stimulate as much muscle as possible. This one will definitely do it. So I've taken a band, I've positioned it right below the knee, and remember, anytime we're talking about abduction, do not put this thing on the kneecap, guys. It doesn't take a lot of pressure to get a patella issue. So I'm going to put this guy right below the knees. I'm going to go through my process again, organize my spine, head position neutral, shoulder blades are retracted, abs are tight, feet screwed into the floor. So I'm going to start my squat the way I do in the body weight squat. I'm going to hip hinge, and as I hinge, my hands are starting to push away. I'm beginning to abduct. Now, I might not get all the way down to even 90 degrees. I may not get down into parallel. There's a lot going on here. That's not as important as beginning the motion in the hip, getting the abduction, and also getting the core to stabilize the movement at the same time. You are setting up the nervous system for squatting. All these components are coming together. Make sure you do both sides. And as I said before, there's a lot going on in this exercise. Take your time with it and choose these chops as best you can. Just slowly go through them, experiment with them, and go from a regressed version to a progressed version, which I just showed you. Okay, so last but not least, we're going to do the plank. We're going to talk a little bit about it. We're going to do a couple of variations. Obviously, the plank is one of the best core exercises that we can do, but a lot of people just aren't doing it correctly. What I see people doing is setting up kind of a tabletop position, once again, all right, and letting the weight fall between my hands and my feet. And what this ends up doing is at some point we're going to start sagging and creating a hyperextension, especially when we're talking about push-ups. What I see a lot of my female clients doing especially is reaching with their head and or breaking in the lower lordotic spine, all right? So what we're going to do is something to cue the body to make sure that we're engaging as much muscle as possible, especially the core region. So instead of just setting this up and letting my weight fall into the floor, I'm going to pull my hands and toes. I'm going to pull the floor together so it looks more like this. I'm pressing down into the floor, engaging my lats, engaging my core, quads, everything is coming together, tightening. And from here, my plank is already happening. My glutes are super, super tight. And if you're not shaking, you're not doing it correctly. So if I'm going to move into a push-up, a chaturanga, it's with this tension in my body. So variations of those could be moving into a Superman. Once again, I'm tight. I can begin to progress this a little bit at a time and just feel my way through it. I can take my hands and begin to walk them out. Make them wider. Slowly come back together. I can move out much tougher. It takes a lot of practice, but I'm keeping that tension on my body the whole time. And once again, there's a regressed version all the way to a progressed version. You may have a difficult time being in a full plank. Maybe you need to start on the knees, but once again, I'm going to pull my hands, lock my entire body into place, keep my hip, knee, and shoulder in a straight line, and you'll get all of the benefits out of that exercise. Okay guys, that's all the exercises and stretches I'm going to show you for core and back today. There are literally thousands of exercises that you could pick and choose from. You need to find the ones that work best for you, that are the easiest to do, require the least amount of equipment, and that you can do just about anywhere, especially at home or even at your desk, because this is where these issues are arising from. We're going to get into the T-spine next, and then after that, I can't wait. We're finally going to load our bodies. We're going to put a bar back there, and we're going to start squatting for real. Thanks for watching.